Man of Steel is a very interesting movie in the superhero film genre, as it started a very big trend in DC and how media viewed Superman as a whole. All of the Superman movies before this viewed him very different as Superman. He was hopeful, optimistic, and the movies represented with a more upbeat tone for the most part. However, this movie changed that mold. They made Superman darker, more flawed in an attempt for the audience to relate with the character. They changed the color palette from very bright and colorful to a shitty piss color. But I digress as I discuss the incredibly controversial Man of Steel. Now, before we get into a lot of my main points as to why I do not like this film, the world in Krypton is something I really want to talk about at the beginning of the movie, which I think is pretty important to talk about because it's at least 15 to 20 minutes of the film. It's somewhat interesting, but there's nothing established, so it appears confusing. Everything feels very supernatural and very odd because there's a bunch of random aliens and stuff that are just kind of there. It just feels kind of weird and out of touch for this movie, as Clark is the only alien we ever see throughout the rest of the film. I just wish they established more of the supernatural elements that are going on throughout the world, since it seems weird that it's only on Krypton. It also seems like there's a lack of establishment in this world. They don't have to do the whole Superman origin story over and over again, but if they want to do it, I feel like they should do it right. And as a movie, it feels like nothing in these first 20 minutes is fleshed out or built up. They put us right in the fucking middle of it without any introduction whatsoever. Now I want to discuss Clark's parents, as they are also in this portion of the movie. I'm not saying that they have to be really in the movie that much or anything prevalent, but once again, like with Krypton, if you want to have them when they are alive in the film, do it right. I couldn't tell you a single thing about Clark's mom, or even let alone whose dad, who has like double the screen time. He's in the movie for like 30 to 40 minutes, and I feel like I know nothing about this guy. I just feel like these characters who are such important pieces in Clark's life, and you make them seem like they're so important in Clark's life, and yet you don't establish them at all. Also, I feel the same with Zod, as I feel like I know nothing about him, and he's the main villain. I couldn't tell you a single thing about him other than he wants to preserve Krypton, and he hates Kal-El's family. And trust me, we will get to Zod. I have a lot to say about him. But just in general, like, we know very little about him besides little bits of dialogue. I just wish we got some more established backstory from these characters. If we really want to put them in here for longer, I feel like they need to be more fleshed out to balance out the amount of screen time that they have. The next thing I want to move on to is what I mentioned earlier, the absolute garbage, piss-flavored color grading. Now, I think this is an obvious take, as even people who like the movie seem to agree with me that it looks horrible in any sense at all. It's just so bland and dull and makes any visually interesting thing about the movie look not impressive because it's just so bleak. It's also hard for me to be interested when it's going on because, like it or not, visual presentation is incredibly important. It's hard to make this world of Krypton interesting because, don't get me wrong, like I said before, there are some cool ideas in here. You can't make it interesting if it looks so bleak and bland and dull. Like, if you look at Krypton in the Christopher Reeve movie, there's a lot of color there, there's a lot of light there, it looks like nicer, it looks like an actual world for the most part. However, when you look at this, it's just so dull and boring, and this movie had like a way better budget and way better visual effects, and yet they still can't make it look nicer. You have the money to make a really good looking Krypton, and you can't do it! But when it comes down to it, the whole world and everything, it kind of just looks like shitty Avatar because of the color grading, because of the lack of world building, because of the boring blandness of Clark's parents. It's just overall a very uninteresting 20 to 30 minutes of the movie. And this is me just discussing, like, not even the first act. Basically, like, the opening, which is, I guess, around that length. But yeah, no, the first, I guess it's 15 and 20. I can't really quite remember. I'll put a number on the screen correcting myself. But overall, just not a very interesting opening to the film in the slightest. Now, I want to discuss Zod since I brought him up recently, and I think he's one of the first things we should talk about because he is the main villain of the story, and I think it's just good to kind of get him out of the way. The actor who plays Zod kind of sucks. He's really campy out, so I can't really take him seriously. And whenever he doesn't scream and yell at you, he just talks in such a monotone, bland voice like a lot of actors do in this movie, which we will also get to. And I just don't really enjoy this version of him because he's not intimidating at all. I didn't find him threatening in the slightest. He's just so overly cartoonish in every scene he's supposed to be serious in. It makes it impossible for me to see him as a real threat. Not once did I find him intimidating or even remotely interesting. And that is really bad because those are some of the two main things a villain should have. He should either have both or either or. Killmonger, I think, is a really great example in how he's a very fascinating character. He's a result of, T'Challa's father's mistakes. And that impacts T'Challa as he, tries to change some of the old ways that his father, set in stone. We don't get anything like that with him. And I'm not saying it's got to be like that, but you don't get anything interesting with him as a character at all. And then he's not a threat or anything. I think a good threat in a other Superman movie that just came out recently would be Lex Luthor in the Superman movie, as he is incredibly threatening in the sense that, he's a big threat to Superman specifically. He constantly challenges him, he's constantly in his way, and he's interesting because of that. However, Zod doesn't have either of those qualities, because sure, he kind of gets in Superman's way, but it's never intimidating. You never feel like he's in danger, besides maybe a couple points, but he's gonna win in the end, so it doesn't really matter. So it's really just seeing them duke it out for a little bit, and then Superman inevitably winning. So when it comes down to it, he's just doesn't have much going for him. He yaps on and on about duty and doing what it takes to preserve Krypton, but they don't go any deeper than these surface level sayings we hear every single villain say in any superhero movie ever. They turned an iconic Superman villain into an unoriginal, one-note villain. Zod isn't even one of my favorite Superman villains, but they really didn't do him justice to his character at all. He feels like a hollow shell, if anything, which is a good saying to put because a lot of characters, as you will see as I continue to talk, feel like hollow shells. Jonathan Kent in this movie has to be the worst adaptation of him ever because he goes against every single idea in which Jonathan Kent is supposed to. He tells him that he should let people die, essentially, and how he doesn't want him to help people while also telling him he's the next Messiah, and all this BS of, oh, the world isn't ready for you yet. When is the world gonna be ready for an alien, if we're being real with ourselves here? When is the world gonna be ready for that? So that is complete BS and just some chosen one bullshit. So that's utterly stupid. And that's his whole character for most of the movie. It's just him telling Clark how much of a messiah he is, and then he contradicts that in one scene by saying how he should just, be a farmer and everything. And this is the complete opposite of what Jonathan Kent has always been. If you actually read the comics, which I know people hate it when you say in the comics, but it really is important here because Jonathan Kent is one of the main reasons why Clark Kent wants to help people. Jonathan Kent in the comics is a caring, nice dude, a simple guy from Kansas who cares and loves people and would definitely help someone if it was in his power, which is why Clark Kent always wants to help people, always has that desire to, help people do stuff. That doesn't work when the father that he has is telling him, hey, you should have let those kids in the bus die. What the fuck? That's so stupid. That makes no sense because it absolutely contradicts his reason for having those motivations. So you see these two hollow shells, not even hollow shells, of Kent's mother and father, who, by the way, the mom gets like, what, 5 lines throughout the entire movie. She's like basically like not prevalent at all. And then, of course, there is the incredibly stupid scene in which Jonathan Kent, dies in a tornado because he didn't want him to be saved because he wasn't ready. I'm sorry, that is so stupid. That is so dumb. And, like, I get it. It's like showing that he's not like a hypocrite or whatever, but it was such a dumb sacrifice. Like, just let go of your pride and let your son save you, bro. Like, it was such a stupid and dumb moment. And Jonathan Kent in this movie is like honestly horrible. Amy Adams has to be probably the most boring Lois Lane we have gotten in any adaptation I have ever seen ever, big screen or small screen. She is horrible in every single way, and not for the reasons you think. Not because Amy Adams gives an atrocious performance, but because there's no personality there. And I don't completely blame that on Amy Adams, even though it doesn't seem like her acting is that great. We'll get to the acting in this movie just in general later. However, it just seems like she's so devoid of any emotion, any character, any charm. And instead, a lot of the movie is just her, like every other character in this movie, telling us, the audience, how Superman is this messiah or whatever, and how he's gonna change the world. And I get it for like a couple scenes of dialogue, but making that her entire personality is so just boring and just kind of lame. And I feel as if like her character doesn't have any of that wit, any of that sort of, I guess like snappiness. I don't know how you would describe it, but that an actual personality, I guess, is what you would, call it. She doesn't have any of that. Like, there's nothing when it comes to that. She just doesn't even seem that much like a journalist in this movie. Like, she's not doing the thing where she's like really trying to push and be pushy and ask questions and all this other stuff. She's just boring. And that's a lot of my problems with a lot of the characters in these movies, is that they're just so boring, because it's not all just about Superman. It's not just about like Clark Kent, which Clark Kent's not even really in this movie. It's mainly just him going around using his superpowers anyways. But, I digress. There's characters around him that are supposed to be good, that help to build the story overall. And there's none of that. None of the characters have any personality, and our main lead hardly has any to begin with. I don't really know how good of an actor Henry Cavill is, mainly because I haven't seen him in that much. However, he doesn't really seem like that great of an actor in this movie, and maybe that's just because Zack Snyder just doesn't seem like that good at, directing actors. But he just doesn't really give off that vibe of Superman, this vibe of this, hopeful person. And maybe that's because, it's really hard to do that in a movie like this, in which that's not really the point of the movie at all. So maybe that's kind of where the issues lie. However, I just kind of feel as if, like, even if you gave Henry Cavill a script in which that was a part of it, I would just never get that feeling from him. I feel like he kind of fits these movies more well than people think he does. And it's because, I don't know, I think it's just the way he acts. It just kind of blends better with these movies than I think it ever would with if he was in the James Gunn movie. And maybe that's just my personal opinion. I'm not saying that his performance was horrible, because, it really wasn't. But it wasn't great, And I just feel like, beyond looking the part, he really does not, give off anything in these movies that I would say feels like Superman. This movie has to be one of the most boring Zack Snyder movies ever. Most of the time, Zack Snyder's films suck, but the action sequences, while a lot of the times have too much going on, are at least entertaining because of how mind-numbing they are. However, in this movie, most of it is just shitty dialogue and flashback. So it's just not that good. It's just boring. Like, it's so dull because it's trying so hard to have these themes that just aren't that well executed, and these characters that are so boring and uninteresting that it kind of just comes off as, pathetic. It's just kind of a sad movie in the sense of it tries so hard to be something that it's not, which is a good movie. Now, I know I touched on it briefly, but I hate how Kal-El is viewed by a god by literally everyone in the movie as like this person that's gonna change everything and is so big and impactful and is more important than everything, and all this Christian symbolism and all this other shit. Throughout the whole movie, he's glazed so much that he's told he's something special and that he's above everyone else, which is the opposite of the whole point of Superman, because he's not supposed to be above everybody else. The point of him is that he's a man of the people. Sure, he's a symbol, but he wants and desires to be normal just like them. And he is, in a sense, normal. He has these emotions, he makes mistakes. That's how he's a lot in the comics and in, other adaptations, mainly the Richard Donner movie and the second movie, in which this is depicted. And I feel as if a lot of people misunderstand that, because a lot of people think Superman in most adaptations is this perfect, amazing good guy, when that's never been true if you really dig deep into like the better stuff, or you look at it more than just on a basis surface level. Because like I said before, Superman does make mistakes. He does lose control of his emotions here and there. He has flaws. And that's what makes him, ironically, more human than some of his villains that are actually human, or some of the people in his life that are actually human. That's kind of the irony of Superman as a whole, is that he's an alien, but he's more human than any of us, while still being the purest of good. And I feel as if people really overlook that, and think he's this perfect, like God or whatever. He's not. He never has been. And sure, he's this, happy, joyful Boy Scout that always tries to do the right thing, but that doesn't mean, he's like a perfect, being. And I feel like that's a big issue with Zack Snyder's film, is while he's trying to separate himself from what he believes Superman to be, he wants to paint, this huge, like, the super part. He emphasizes the super part more than the man. And in reality, the man to Superman is what's more important than anything. Another huge problem with this film is the fact that Clark does not seem to have any sort of care about his dad. Jor-El is like more important in this movie than he is in other films, as I kind of stated before. And there's no real dynamic between the two. Like, it doesn't seem like there's this like real like moment in which Clark is like shocked that he's found his parents, or that he's so happy to finally see the person like his father or his mother. Now, my very last and final piece I want to say about the Man of Steel movie is how everything that is in the third act, all the destruction, everything that's destroyed, contradicts the entirety of Superman's character throughout the whole story. His whole thing is that he wants to save people. His whole thing is that he desires to help people, and he, wants people to be safe. And then he throws Zod into a gas station, and then dodges a semi-truck that wouldn't have hurt him anyways, and just demolishes a building, and then just absolutely destroys so much property unnecessarily. He doesn't save a single soul in that third act, and that's because there's not any citizens on screen. But he doesn't save anybody. He's not trying to save anybody. His whole thing, his whole goal at the end of the film is just to absolutely demolish Zod without a single care about property damage or anything like that, which is ridiculous because that's not Superman. Superman would try to, disarm him or try to take him away from the middle of Metropolis, in which there is so much property damage going on. But he doesn't do that. Now, he is perfectly okay with absolutely demolishing the entire center of a city with thousands and thousands of people. And that is probably my biggest reason as to why I hate this movie.